Our pockets were full of dang, so there was no real need from the point of view of Craston any more pretty Polly to tolchok some old Vec in an alley and viddy him swim in his blood while we counted the takens and divided by 4, nor to do the ultra-violent on some shiverin', starry, gray-haired titsa in a shop and go smecking off with the till's guts. But, as they say, money isn't everything. Welcome to Positive Read-Ins. Support this channel and check out new literature by getting your copy of Commutin'. You can link to it in the description. You can also link to the Gymnasia Press website, and you can get the short story collection Comorbidities and the novel Non-Local. Get all 3 and become a better person. I should start this video by apologizing. I'm going to try something new here. I'm going to try to record this entire video without any cuts, just one long shot. This is a bit of a challenge. I was inspired in part by Dr. Vinay Prasad, and I'm going to try this out. I'm wearing this hat for emotional support. We'll see how it goes. The read-in from the beginning came from Anthony Burgess's 1962 novel, A Clockwork Orange. This novel is probably better known, or at least the story is better known, from the Stanley Kubrick film that was made 10 years after in 1972. The Kubrick film is a lot more violent. The book is certainly violent, but a lot of the violence is just being told in kind of the idiosyncratic and cool way that the 15-year-old narrator Alex tells it. And so it doesn't come across as shocking maybe as the film. The novel is, I guess it would fall under the dystopian genre, and more so than the film, I didn't realize that the novel is, like most dystopian novels or works, it is a critique of culture and technology. Maybe you could even say it's anti-technology, and it's imagining the future where technology is out of control. It's a techno-authoritarian future that it is envisioning for us. And in some ways, as I was reading this, I thought maybe this is the anti-vaxxer classic. Is Anthony Burgess an anti-vaxxer? Up there with RFK Jr. and Eric Clapton. I'm not so sure about that. I didn't do any research into it. But the main character, Alex, is essentially vaccinated against violence. He goes through a series of medical procedures where he gets this shot, and then he has to see horrible stuff, and eventually it creates like antibodies against bad thoughts. So when he thinks about violence, he literally feels ill. So with that topic, there's two sections that I want, or two kind of themes that I want to look at in this novel. One is the perhaps pessimistic, dark outlook that Burgess has, which is that we are inherently bad to a certain extent, and the very beautiful things in life, like music, which Anthony Burgess loved and created himself, actually leads us into violence and violent thoughts. And then the other hand is, what are we if we don't have our personal choice? The question, or I think the implication here is, if we're choosing to be evil, that's better than not being able to choose and just being good without a choice. As you can see from the first reading that I did, there is a lot of strange language. This is a type of a teenage speak that he calls nadsat. So words like dang, which is money, tolchok is to hit, to strike, krastin, stealin, vidi, to see. So a lot of this language comes from Russian, which Burgess studied to some extent. I don't believe he was fluent in it, but he was inspired by that. But he also has some Cockney rhyming slang. So the pretty Polly is rhymes with lolly, which is a reference to money. So that's the language that it's written in. It can be a little confusing at first, but once you kind of get an understanding of the rules that it's playing by and you see the words enough, it falls into place without a problem. So the first section I'm going to look at, where we get Alex, who his one redeeming quality, he's kind of an awful character in some ways, big on the what he calls ultra violence, which seems to specifically be sexual violence. He loves classical music. This was shown a lot in the film as a love for Beethoven, but it's many different artists that he talks about throughout the book. So here he says, "Then, brothers, it came, O bliss, bliss in heaven. I lay all Nagoy to the ceiling, my Gulliver on my rookers on the pillows, glazies closed, wrought open in bliss, sluician the sluice of lovely sounds." So he's sitting there naked with his arms back on the pillow under his Gulliver, his head, and he's listening to this music. Oh, it was gorgeousness and gorgeosity made flesh. The trombones crunched red gold under my bed, and behind my Gulliver the trumpets three-wise, silver-flamed, and there by the door the timps rolling through my guts and out again, crunched like candy thunder. Oh, it was wonder of wonders. So and that's quite a beautiful passage, I think, for Burgess, his writing. He does have some moments in here where it's very good writing. He's a Shakespearean, I think, by trade. He even wrote a biography on Shakespeare over here. Continuing on, he says, "As I sluicied my glazies tight, shut to shut in the bliss that was better than any synth mech, bog, or god." This is a reference to the drugs that they're taking with their milk. "I knew such lovely pictures. There were Vex and Titstas, so men and women, both young and starry, lying on the ground screaming for mercy, and I was smecking, so smiling, all over my rot and grinding my foot in their listos, their faces. And there were devochkas ripped and creeching against walls, and I plunging like a schlagla into them. And indeed, when the music, which was one movement only, rose to the top of its big highest tower, then lying there on the bed with glazies tight shut and rookers behind my Gulliver, I broke and spattered and cried, ah, with bliss of it. And so the lovely music glided to its glowing close." So we can see here, he's listening to this beautiful classical music, but really what it's drawn out of him are these scenes of violence, both physical violence, kicking people, but also there's the sexual imagery, the rape there that he's also committing. So music for him seems to be driving him to do bad things. And this is brought up again a few pages later. He's reading in a magazine. He says, "I had to have a smeck, though, thinking of what I'd vidied once in one of these, like articles on modern youth, about how modern youth would be better off if a lively appreciation of the arts could be encouraged." So he's laughing because he's reading about how they're saying if the youth would just read and listen to music, get involved in the arts, they would be better off. "Great music," it said, "and great poetry would quieten modern youth down and make modern youth more civilized. Civilize my civilized yarbles. And yarbles is balls here. Music always sort of sharpened me up, oh my brothers, and made me feel like old Bog himself, ready to make with the old Donner and Blitzen, and have Vex and Titzes creeding away in my ha-ha power. So it seems to be that music, the evilness of it is it fills him with strength and power, makes him feel like a god, and kind of how Nietzsche argued the will to power, that man is driven to just control other things, and this is what he's doing. So driven by the music, wanting to destroy others. The book is written in 3 sections. The first section, we get introduced to Alex and his friends, and it ends with him committing a crime where he actually gets arrested. His friends turned against him, and he got in trouble and got caught. The whole second section is Alex in prison and then getting this experimental treatment. And in this section, this is where we get some of the philosophy about what we're losing by submitting to this futuristic technology, this kind of medical answer to the ills of society, getting a vaccine against violence. So Alex becomes sort of friends with the minister in the prison, and they're having a talk about this experimental treatment. And he says here, the minister says, "It's not been used yet," he said, "not in this prison 6655321. That's the name, Alex's name in prison. Himself, that's the leader of the prison, himself has grave doubts about it. I must confess I share those doubts. The question is whether such a technique can really make a man good. Goodness comes from within, 6655321. Goodness is something chosen. When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man. He would have gone on with a lot more of this crap. But we could sleuthy the next lot of plenties, marching clank, clank down the iron stairs to come for a bit of religion." So the question there really gets posed. The important part is goodness is something chosen. When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man. And that's, I think, the driving message in this book is to get us to think, well, what happens even if we do have no more violence? If it comes without choice, we have also no more humans. This comes up, the 2 more parts I want to look at here. So again, just maybe a few chapters later, he says here, "It may not be nice to be good, little 6655321. It may be horrible to be good. And when I say that to you, I realize how self-contradictory that sounds. I know I shall have many sleepless nights about this. What does God want? Does God want..." In my book here, it says woodness. I think maybe this is a typo. Maybe it should be, does God want goodness? Though maybe it is woodness, like stiffness. But we'll say this is a typo. Does God want goodness or the choice of goodness? Is a man who chooses the bad perhaps in some way better than a man who has good imposed upon him? And again, I think this is the deep question that this novel is posing through its story. Is the man who chooses the bad perhaps in some way better than the man who has good imposed upon him? And then finally, at the end of this section, there is a bit of a performance. Alex is brought out in front of all these kind of politicians and heads at the prison, so they can see a little performance of him being bullied in a sense by some man, and he doesn't commit violence towards him. And then he has a woman walk by and he doesn't do anything to her. So this performance to see how effective this is. And this is Dr. Brodsky who is leading this. And the prison chaplain, who we had earlier in this section, yells out, "Choice," rumbled a deep golos, so a deep voice. "I vidied it belonged to the prison Charlie. He has no real choice, has he? Self-interest, fear of physical pain drove him to that grotesque act of self-abasement. Its insincerity was clearly to be seen. He ceases to be a wrongdoer. He ceases also to be a creature capable of moral choice." So this is the chaplain's argument. He's self-abasing. This isn't what he really wants to do, but he has no other choice. And so he's not really making the choice of the moral choice, which is the whole purpose of morality. "These are subtleties," smiled Dr. Brodsky. "We are not concerned with motive, with the higher ethics. We are concerned only with cutting down crime." And, chipped in this bolshy, well-dressed minister, "with relieving the ghastly congestion in our prisons." "Hear, hear," said somebody. There was a lot of govereading, so discussion, talking, and arguing then, and I just stood there, brothers, completely ignored by all these ignorant brachnies, bastards. So I creached out, me, what about me? Where do I come into all this? Am I like just some animal or dog? And that's exactly it. Or really like a machine, which we'll get to at the last section here. So Alex is being deprived of his choice. He is at one point literally on the ground kissing the guy's boot. The next part, when the girl comes out, he's telling her to walk on him. And this is essentially what the power structures want. They want to take the energy of music, and again, I think this is the implication from Burgess. So they take the energy of music, the energy of power that's coming out of young men, young people, and make it wholly ineffective and self-abasing and on its knees. And that's the vision of kind of this techno-authoritarian vision that Burgess is trying to warn us of. And then finally, the last section here that I want to look at, in the third section of the novel, Alex gets out. He has a run-in with all these people that he committed crimes against earlier in the novel. And at one part, he goes back to this writer's house who he had beaten up and raped his wife. And then later, when he comes back there, this is after Alex has realized, just like in the movie, his droogs, his friends, have become police officers, and they've taken him out into the countryside and beaten him. And he goes to this guy's house. And when he's in that guy's house, the guy, the author, he wrote a book actually called A Clockwork Orange. And he keeps telling Alex, "Oh, I know who you are. I saw your picture in the newspaper." Of course, this is kind of a dramatic irony on the level of Oedipus the King. And he keeps telling him, you're a victim of the modern age. And then Alex gets his copy, his book, to look at, well, what's this book about? And he says here, "Good God, good bog, I thought, he is another Alex. Then I leaf through, standing in his pajamas and bare nogas, but not feeling one malanky bit cold, the cottage being warm all through, and I could not vidi what the book was about. It seemed written in a very Bazumni-like style," which again would be kind of what this book is also written in a Bazumni-like style, "full of ah and oh and that cow. But what seemed to come out of it was that all ludis, all people, nowadays were being turned into machines, and that they were really you and me and him and kiss my sharis, more like a natural growth than a fruit. So in this kind of self-referential, maybe postmodernist type part here, we get some insight into what this book that we're reading is actually supposed to be, that people are being turned into machines. They're actually more like some kind of natural growth, some natural fruit, but they're being turned into machines, and that's the tragedy of the future. Now, something that Burgess was not happy about, and we'll have to decide whether you're happy about it when you read the book, but the very last chapter of this novel was not included in the American version, and it's also not included in Stanley Kubrick's storyline. And essentially that last chapter is Alex realizing that he's not happy being just kind of hanging out with his droogs and committing crimes, but actually he feels like he maybe needs to get married, settle down, and have children. And I know when I say this, it kind of sounds ridiculous, especially with all the stuff that came before with Alex, but it's not so unbelievable when you read it. And in some ways, I actually think it's the more pessimistic ending, because it's kind of suggesting that, okay, Alex went out, did all these horrible things. He kind of recovers from this violence vaccine. But then he's just going to go and have children, and kind of the cycle is going to continue. And so in that regards, it is in some ways maybe more pessimistic than you get in the film. It also, the novel's written in 3 parts. Each part has 7 chapters. In the US version, you only get 6 chapters at the end. So it's kind of losing that 7 chapters, and you might think, well, what's the big deal? But Burgess, again, being the Shakespearean that he is, was using these 7 chapters to kind of reference the 7 ages of man that is in Shakespeare's famous monologue by Jacques in As You Like It. So there's a comment here that, yes, this is the future, this techno-authoritarian future, but also that we have a tradition, we have this kind of natural arc, these 7 ages, and Alex, he's a criminal, he's this, horrible person maybe in some ways, but he's going to reform, but it's just going to kind of keep going, and maybe we need some other means to control society. Well, that's the book. It's enjoyable to read, thought-provoking, and as I said, less violent than the movie suggests. Thank you for listening.